It is Friday, 7/17. It is Monday. My apologies, I'm still stuck. It is Monday, 7/17/2017. It is 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and so you know what time it is. It's time for a little bit of coin metal. And still, we're still here. Despite all of the predictions to the contrary, and all of that little bit of dippy diving during the weekend and a little bit before that during last week, Bitcoin seems to be in a little bit of a recovery. Last time I checked, it was around $2,200, but that was before I tried just a little bit to force it to be get your ass kicked at Jiu-Jitsu Monday, and unfortunately, it couldn't be. You know, I tried getting my ass kicked at Jiu-Jitsu today, and as a matter of fact, I did get my ass kicked at Jiu-Jitsu today, and but I just couldn't get my heart rate back down. And for those of you who have been paying attention to this aspect of the show, and those of you who have not, I've been recovering from a couple of Jiu-Jitsu induced injuries, and it's a tough thing for anybody who does get into Jiu-Jitsu to be injured. You know, it's a healthy thing. It reminds you that you can be injured and that you can injure other people while you're doing your practice. But it's a drag, man. I mean, your game suffers, and you know, if you don't have as readily an access to training as some people, it can be tough to recover. Personally, I've been training all my life in some way or another, so it's just a matter of regimen change for me. You know, I mean, now granted, going back to jiu-jitsu, let me put a little bit of context for you. I took like a week or so off, right? And so last week I came back and we did positional sparring a little bit, but it was very positional. You know, we didn't do 5-minute rounds. We didn't do wide open rounds. We weren't really going for submissions, just escape from guard. And so it wasn't terribly aggressive. So I'm like, all right, cool. You know, this is a good way to be coming back from the injury, because I didn't really strain my arm too much or my leg. And so, you know, everything was cool. And then today I go in, and for whatever reason, we're doing open to submission sparring, and for 5 minutes. And of course, I get a brown belt. And now I did last for almost that entire period with him, but it took everything out of me. And I don't know. I guess I wasn't quite as ready to come back as I would like. You know, maybe I should have started with that week or so back in with fundamentals classes, and that is something that I've done before. And for those of you who have or are injured right now with regard to your jiu-jitsu practice, of course, assuming that you are a practitioner, if you are suffering from an injury at the moment, and you're already into your advanced classes and whatnot, dude, take a step back, go back down and do some fundamentals, or at least just come in on open mats and drill, which I'm probably going to do both tomorrow. I'm thinking about just going in for fundamentals, getting a tune-up by some white belt trying to prove something, and enjoy the humbleness for the moment, and you know, get my wind back. Because I mean, I had no trouble with regard to setting up defenses. The only thing that he caught me on was something that I wasn't looking for, and so I just hadn't experienced it yet. Hadn't had any training with regard to the setup for it. And so just wasn't anticipating it. He snuck it in on me and got me with it. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw it down. And Mr. JJ had said something about it being a long time since he had heard this song. And I happen to really love this song. So I'm going to go ahead and play it as our first dance, just as a reminder that despite the fact that we did dip below 2K on Bitcoin, we're still here, baby. We're still here. Live Undead by Slayer, here on Coin Metal. And that was Textures with Regenesis. Kind of a little bit of a reminder of how things have been going, you know. It's certainly too soon to call any of this over. Shit, I don't even think we're to the beginning yet. I mean, and it's really funny because it's like there's so much new stuff going on in cryptocurrencies, you know, and it's like and no matter where you shift your attention, there's something else going on like 180 degrees behind you. And that's like that's just the nature of the beast, you know. And so yeah, you gotta try and keep apprised, keep an eye on what's going on around you. And I guess that's one of the reasons why I do jiu-jitsu, because if you're not living in the moment in jiu-jitsu, you're getting strangled. You know, there's just no two ways about it. And or you know, your arm's getting taken, or somebody's taking control of your leg, or you know, somebody's choking off your breast some other way. It doesn't matter if you're not really paying attention to the greater shape of things. You get wrapped up like somebody's fighting a goddamn anaconda. You're in his world. It's too late. Anyway, I wanted to touch on a article right off the bat here for Bitcoin, and this one is off of Inside Bitcoins by Mr. Joseph Young. I'm assuming he does have a penis. Written July 14th, 2017. Bitcoin certificate is the most traded product on traditional Swiss exchange. What a fucking surprise there, right? Initially, issuers of the Bitcoin certificate being traded on the Swiss stock exchange released 20 million Swiss franc worth of certificates, which is worth around $20 million. As demand started to increase from both individual and institutional investors, the supply of Bitcoin certificates was increased by the issuers to 40 million francs, approximately $40 million. Within a relatively short period of time, Bitcoin certificate has become the most traded structured product on the Swiss stock exchange, with consistent mainstream media coverage from well-respected financial media networks such as Wall Street Journal, as well as recognized regional mainstream media outlets. In an interview with Swiss daily newspaper Neue Zürcher Zeitung, known for its high standard of journalism, Bitcoin Association Switzerland's Lucas Bestchert stated that the vast majority of investors still lack proper understanding of the structure, purpose, policy, and philosophies of Bitcoin. And, sir, on that note, I think you'd be surprised. Like many billionaire investors, including Mark Cuban, they are investing in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency market to understand the technical intricacies of blockchain technology-based digital currencies better. Still, Bestchert expressed his concerns over the rapid increase in demand for Bitcoin and explained that only those that truly see and believe in the technology should buy Bitcoin as both a long-term investment and a digital currency. Bestchert admits Bitcoin is hyped within the Swiss market and the demand has been evident has the Bitcoin... You son of a bitch. Joseph, as, not has. Let's reread. Bestjert admits Bitcoin is hyped within the Swiss market, and the demand has been evident as the Bitcoin certificate that it is currently the most traded product on the Swiss stock exchange. Regulated Bitcoin exchange traded funds such as Grayscale Investments Bitcoin Investment Trust, GBTC, have also risen significantly in terms of popularity from institutional and regulated traders over the past few years. At the time of reporting, GBTC, which represents 10% of the Bitcoin price, is being traded at $380 per share. That means, in consideration of the price at the time of writing, $23.62, it is being traded at around 65% premium in regulated markets. To address the rising demand for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, financial service providers, including Swiss-based firm CryptoFund, have launched cryptocurrency portfolios for large-scale traders and institutional investors. According to I'm not certain how to pronounce this, so forgive me if I screw it up. New Zürcher Zeitung Crypto Fund's index-based and passive fund product will collaborate with qualified investors and establish a portfolio of a wide range of cryptocurrencies. Quote, the attention and the headlines on cryptocurrencies were the reasons why we started to look at the public with our project. Okay, said CryptoFund CEO Jan Brzezinski. Wow. Jan Brzezinski. Okay, cool. Since the beginning of 2017, the price of Bitcoin increased from $980 to $2,362, surpassing the expectations of investors that have perceived Bitcoin as a long-term safe haven asset. However, in Europe and Asia, a growing number of businesses and merchants have started to adopt the cryptocurrency as a legitimate payment method and a digital currency. Recently, Ferrando, the largest food service provider and delivery platform in Germany, and more than 260,000 restaurants, bars, and stores in Japan have started to accept Bitcoin as a payment method. With both demand toward Bitcoin as a safe haven asset from institutional investors and as a digital currency for merchants and users rising at an exponential rate, analysts predict Bitcoin price to increase at a rapid rate in the upcoming months, especially if some of the technical issues, including scaling, are resolved. First, Joseph, read the thing aloud, man. There are a few scansion issues with this, and as instead of has on that one little sentence there. Anyway, otherwise, a half decent article. It's an interesting perspective, and I will say this: regardless of its performance, its certificates performance, whatever, it doesn't matter. More people are going to start using Bitcoin. I mean, they're not really being given a choice. There are more and more capital control regulations going in place every single day, trying to entrap that monetary value within a geography. And what else do you expect people to do? I mean, I'm starting to hear about things like, and this is just like institutional guys that are doing face-to-face transactions at brokerage places where they were doing trading floor stuff for the the New York Stock Exchange, basically. Like there's areas off to the side that they have a bunch of tables and shit, and these guys are doing doing cryptocurrency trading face to face with cell phones and such. I thought that was awesome. It's like, before long though, I predict, before long, the volume of guys that are doing that are going to get to such a critical mass that they're either going to A, ask for area on the floor, or B, be assigned area on the floor. I know how audacious and whatnot it would, what kind of circumstances it would take for B to happen, but there's every possibility for it out there. I mean, the kind of stuff I see going on out there, I think that's a pretty legitimate claim for something that would happen in the future, is that or prediction. I know that's the general term for it. Forgive me, I spent a little bit of time in jiu-jitsu today. Not long enough apparently, but soon enough I'll be enduring the full deal, the full meal deal. But yeah, anyway, Bitcoin certificates. Now you'll notice that despite the fact that this whiz-bang thing has been traded on the Swiss exchange, a traditional Swiss exchange at that, which just blows my mind. I mean, and with regard to that, you want to talk about mainstream adoption? The Swiss have fucking adopted it into a traditional exchange. How much more legitimate do you need to be? Really? I mean, these people, not up until, I would say relatively recently, have had the, well, I don't know, I think they still have the reputation of being very, very good with regard to people's banking and the security of their accounts there. I mean, it was one of those things that you would say in a joke, just, put it in my Swiss bank account. Because supposedly it was outside the tax jurisdiction of the United States. Apparently that's been kind of challenged. But in any case, there have been predictions about the kind of effects that these derivatives would have on the relative price of Bitcoin. And in all honesty, I don't think that they're... I think that there are already things that serve this function within the cryptosphere. Like what would be a quote-unquote derivative, such as this Bitcoin certificate, in the traditional markets, the legacy markets, that would be something like an altcoin and or an ICO token or some token of that. Point being that it's already covered, I mean, if you wanted something to trade against Bitcoin or to evaluate Bitcoin against, that you could trade in, I mean, there's fucking altcoin exchanges coming out your ass out there. And so, yeah, I don't see that this is going to impair any of the liquidity that's already interested in crypto or that is already participating in the crypto markets at large. My only concern would be that somewhere along the line, a regulatory body would try and say something like, these are the only things that you can legitimately trade in with regard to Bitcoin. You can't hold Bitcoin anymore. You can't hold altcoins anymore. You can't mine them anymore. You can only do derivatives. At that point, I think we would probably have a civil war, but that's beside the point. That's about the only threat that I really see with these, is that at some point or another, a federal government would consider these the only quote-unquote legitimate means of participating for the average person in cryptocurrencies. However, that's something that people that look in the world with a black and white kind of perspective would think is even possible. The fact of the matter is these are globally capable currencies. Bitcoin specifically. And so the idea that a restriction like that would be, something that could actually last or actually function is just stupid. And so it goes back to that mutually assured destruction metaphor that we've been using on this show, is that, if there were such a regulation ever to pass, that country, if it had 30% compliance, okay, would be falling into the Stone Age by the millisecond. Because again, these markets are on a 24/7 basis. Okay, they're not on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 8 to 5 basis. No. They're global and they're 24/7. And so, go ahead, drop anchor. The rest of the river is going to keep moving. And you're going to be stuck at that position until you pull anchor and start flowing with the tide. And it's a terrible position for governments to be in at this point, because their dependency structures have all been kind of set up to depend on the Federal Reserve as or with regard to the United States, as the arbiter of value of more or less everything, via interest rate adjustment or disbursement of additional notes. All of those ways are now going to be upended, because there's going to be something else on the market for people to evaluate those same things in. And when it pleases them more to do it with Bitcoin than Federal Reserve notes, it's easier for them to do it with Bitcoin than Federal Reserve notes, cheaper, faster. They're going to do it, and they're going to get rid of you, other than, maybe doing physical Federal Reserve notes. But they're not going to be using Federal Reserve notes in a digital capacity, not through banks, not through Visa. And the whole edifice that's dependent on that monetary volume moving through those channels, it's going to all wither up and die. And I mean, they're already trying to kill it off. So it's kind of a good thing, bad thing for them. They're trying to replace entire departments of their businesses with blockchains. When they talk about making things more efficient, what they're really talking about is closing down facilities, firing people. So, that's any case. So yeah, Bitcoin certificates being traded on the Swiss exchange, a traditional Swiss exchange. It's a good thing, bad thing, no thing for Bitcoin. I don't really think this will really harm us in the broader term, but I think it gives people a nice way to dabble. I don't see how, over the long term, how it will interact with us. I don't know. I'd really have to investigate more into the way that they're pairing it against Bitcoin, because it seemed like the valuation was like at 1/10 or something. I don't know. Like I said, I'll have to investigate. Any case, let's go ahead and throw it back down to a little bit of music. And what the hell? Static X, Cannibal, here on Coin Metal. And that was Sepultura with Altered State off of Arise. Yeah, for whatever reason, when I change the directory on this app, it just says, "Oh, you mean you want to change music too? Here, we're gonna play some Slipknot." And while I don't mind its choice of music, it kind kind of pissed me off anyway. So, as far as what we were going to get into the rest of today. And I have been fiddling around on here. And I've had this tab open on my browser for a while now. And it's because of Friday. I came across it on Friday, and I wasn't sure that I wanted to dive into it. And so, yeah. But I did, you know what? I came across another one, and I thought this one's actually a little more timely. And so I want to go ahead and tap on this first, because it's just a quick little article here. And this one is on Inside Bitcoin. And let's see here. Hold on. Never mind. They've got it nested a site within a site within a site. Let's make sure that it's for sure on Cointelegraph. Where is it? What? That's weird. It's not exactly what we were looking for. Son of a bitch. Man, I hate it when that happens. Okay. So that's open. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to find the actual story. I clicked on it and got something else. And let's make sure this is actually from this website. It appears to be. And so this is on Cointelegraph. And it's by Olusegun Ogundeji. My apologies, sir, if I've mispronounced that. And he's clearly a man, so he does have a penis. Malicious ISP can intercept Bitcoin traffic. Study. Researchers have found that the extreme efficiency of internet routing attacks and the centralization of the Bitcoin network in few networks worldwide could make it susceptible to routing attacks. Their submission is based on two identified characteristics that may make it relatively easy for a malicious internet service provider, ISP, to intercept a lot of Bitcoin traffic. Routing attacks on Bitcoin. To start with, most Bitcoin nodes are hosted in few ISPs. 13 ISPs, 0.026% of all ISPs, host 30% of the entire Bitcoin network. Secondly, most of the traffic exchanged between Bitcoin nodes traverse few ISPs, and 3 ISPs can see 60% of all Bitcoin traffic. Bitcoin constitutes a target of choice for attackers already, but while many attack vectors have already been covered, Maria Apostolaki, my apologies, Maria, and Lawrence Van Beaver of ETH Zurich and Aviv Zohar of Hebrew University find that one important vector has been left out: attacking the currency via the internet routing infrastructure itself. You know what? We might even dive into that report instead. As Bitcoin connections are routed over the internet in clear text and without integrity checks, any third party on the forwarding path can eavesdrop, drop, modify, infect, or delay Bitcoin messages, such as blocks or transactions. They added that detecting such attackers is challenging because it requires inferring the exact forwarding paths taken by the Bitcoin traffic using measurements, trace routing, or routing data, BGP announcements, both of which can be forged. What makes such attacks possible? The routing attacks against Bitcoin are made possible by two key characteristics of the Internet's infrastructure: the efficiency of routing manipulation, BGP hijacks, and the centralization of Bitcoin from the routing perspective. The attack happens by performing a partitioning attack, which diverts relevant Bitcoin traffic using BGP hijacking. The BGP is the de facto routing protocol that regulates how IP packets are forwarded on the internet. For all the prefixes pertaining to the Bitcoin nodes to be isolated. As a result, the attacker receives all the traffic destined to those prefixes and splits them into two packet streams, relevant and irrelevant. In the later phase, the attacker cuts all vulnerable connections that cross the partition to create leakage points. These nodes are connected to the rest of the network via stealth connections. Impact on the Bitcoin ecosystem. One of the reasons why routing attacks have been overlooked in Bitcoin is that they are often considered too challenging to be practical. Even ignoring detectability, mitigating network attacks is hard, as it is essentially a human-driven process consisting of filtering, routing around, or disconnecting the attacker. Well, now that's certainly an interesting possibility, and I'm sure somebody's been watching on this, but we do have their paper. Now let's see how long this business is, because this may be fodder for the show, really. Yeah, I don't know. I think this is something that could impact possibly more than one cryptocurrency. Certainly, if it's successful on one. Let's see. It's only 18 pages. I think we can chew this thing and spit it out. So, fuck it. Let's do it. Hijacking Bitcoin, routing attacks on cryptocurrencies. And the attributions at the top here are Maria Apostolaki, Eth Zurich, I'm sorry, that was just her affixing, who she's representing here. Aviv Zohar, the Hebrew University. Laurent Van Beaver, Eth Zurich. And I'm not going to read their emails. If you want to read their emails, they do have emails posted on this. So, yeah. Let's make this thing a little bigger here. Abstract. As the most successful cryptocurrency to date, Bitcoin constitutes a target of choice for attackers. While many attack vectors have already been uncovered, one important vector has been left out, though: attacking the currency via the internet routing infrastructure itself. Indeed, by manipulating routing advertisements, BGP attacks, or by naturally intercepting traffic, autonomous systems can intercept and manipulate a large fraction of Bitcoin traffic. This paper presents the first taxonomy of routing attacks and their impact on Bitcoin, considering both small-scale attacks targeting individual nodes and large-scale attacks targeting the network as a whole. While challenging, we show that two key properties make routing attacks practical. 1, the efficiency of routing manipulation, and 2, the significant centralization of Bitcoin in terms of mining and routing. Specifically, we find that any network attacker can hijack few, greater than 100 BGP prefixes to isolate close to 50% of the mining power, even when considering that mining pools are heavily multi-homed. We show that on-path network attackers can considerably slow down block propagation by interfering with few key Bitcoin messages. We demonstrate the feasibility of each attack against the deployed Bitcoin software. We also quantify their effectiveness on the current Bitcoin topology using data collected from a Bitcoin supernode combined with BGP routing data. The potential damage to Bitcoin is worrying. By isolating parts of the network or delaying block propagation, attackers can cause a significant amount of mining power to be wasted, leading to revenue losses and enabling a wide range of exploits such as double spending. To prevent such effects in practice, we provide both short and long-term countermeasures, some of which can be deployed immediately. Number 1. Introduction. With more than 16 million Bitcoins valued at 17 billion US dollars and up to 300,000 daily transactions as of March 2017, Bitcoin is the most successful cryptocurrency to date. Remarkably, Bitcoin has achieved this as an open and fully decentralized system. Instead of relying on a central entity, Bitcoin nodes build a large overlay network between them and use consensus to agree on a set of transactions recorded within Bitcoin's core data structure, the blockchain. Anyone is free to participate in the network, which boasts more than 6,000 nodes. And I guess there's a reference in here for number 4, and can usually connect to any other node. Given the amount of money at stake, Bitcoin is an obvious target for attackers. Indeed, numerous attacks have been described targeting different aspects of the system, including double spending, eclipsing, transaction malleability, or attacks targeting mining and mining pools. Let's see. One important attack vector has been overlooked, though: attacking Bitcoin via the internet infrastructure using routing attacks. As Bitcoin connections are routed over the internet in clear text and without integrity checks, any third party on the forwarding path can eavesdrop, drop, modify, inject, or delay Bitcoin messages such as blocks or transactions. Detecting such attackers is challenging, as it requires inferring the exact forwarding paths taken by Bitcoin traffic using measurements, e.g. traceroute, or routing data, BGP announcements, both of which can be forged. Even ignoring detectability, mitigating network attacks is also hard, as it is essentially a human-driven process consisting of filtering, routing around, or disconnecting the attacker. As an illustration, it took YouTube close to 3 hours to locate and resolve rogue BGP announcements targeting its infrastructure in 2008. More recent examples of routing attacks, such as... They've got several references in here to different attacks, and you have to look up the reference, and I'm not going to do that. Took 2 hours to resolve, took hours to resolve in November and June of 2015. One of the reasons why routing attacks have been overlooked in Bitcoin is that they are often considered too challenging to be practical. Indeed, perturbing a vast peer-to-peer network which uses random flooding is hard, as an attacker would have to intercept many connections to have any impact. Yet, two key characteristics of the internet's infrastructure make routing attacks against Bitcoin possible. Number 1, the efficiency of routing manipulation, BGP hijacks, and number 2, the centralization of Bitcoin from the routing perspective. First, individuals located anywhere on the internet can manipulate routing to intercept all connections to not only one but many Bitcoin nodes. As we show in this paper, these routing manipulations are prevalent today and do divert Bitcoin traffic. Second, few AS hosts, most of I'm sorry, I don't know what the AS stands for. ASs host most of the nodes and mining power, while others intercept and a considerable fraction of the connections. This work in this paper, we present the first taxonomy of routing attacks on Bitcoin, a comprehensive study of their impact, and a list of deployable countermeasures. We consider two general attacks that AS-level attackers can perform. First, we evaluate the ability of attackers to isolate a set of nodes from the Bitcoin network, effectively partitioning it. Second, we evaluate the impact of delaying block propagation by manipulating a small number of key Bitcoin messages. From both exploits, we consider node-level attacks along with more challenging but more disruptive network-wide attacks. Partitioning attacks. The goal of a partitioning attack is to completely disconnect a set of nodes from the network. This requires the attacker to divert and cut all the connections between the set of nodes and the rest of the network. We describe a complete attack procedure in which an attacker can verifiably isolate a selected set of nodes using BGP hijacks. Our procedure is practical and only requires basic knowledge of the Bitcoin topology, namely the IP addresses of the nodes the attacker wants to isolate. Due to the complexity of the Bitcoin network, ergo multi-homed pools and secret peering agreements between pools, the initial isolated set might contain nodes that leak information from and to the rest of the network. We explain how the attacker can identify and remove these leakage points until the partition is complete. Delay attacks. The goal of a delay attack is to slow down the propagation of blocks towards or from a given set of nodes. Unlike partitioning attacks, which require a perfect cut, delay attacks are effective even when a subset of the connections are intercepted. As such, attackers can perform delay attacks on connections they are naturally intercepting, making them even harder to detect. We again describe a complete attack procedure. An attacker can run on an unintercepted Bitcoin traffic so that the delivery of blocks is delayed by up to 20 minutes. That's two confirmations. The procedure consists of modifying few key Bitcoin messages while making sure that the connections are not disrupted. Practicality. We showcase the practicality of each attack and evaluate their network-wide impact using a comprehensive set of measurements, simulations, and experiments. Regarding partitioning attacks, we show that hijacks are effective in diverting Bitcoin traffic by performing a hijack in the wild against our own nodes. We find that it takes less than 90 seconds to reroute all traffic flows through the attacker once the hijack is initiated. We also show that any AS in the internet hijacking less than 100 prefixes can isolate up to 47% of the mining power, and this even when considering that mining pools are multi-homed. Hijacks involving that many prefixes are frequent and already divert Bitcoin traffic. Regarding delay attacks, we show that an attacker intercepting 50% of a node connections can leave it uninformed of the most recent Bitcoin blocks 60% of the time. We also show that intercepting a considerable percentage of Bitcoin traffic is practical due to is practical due to the centralization of Bitcoin at the routing level. 1AS, namely Hurricane Electric, can naturally intercept more than 30% of all Bitcoin connections. Impact on Bitcoin. The damages caused to Bitcoin in case of a successful routing attack can be substantial. By isolating a part of the network or delaying the propagation of blocks, attackers can force nodes to waste part of their mining power as some of the blocks they create are discarded. Partitioning also enables the attacker to filter transactions that clients try to include in the blockchain. In both cases, miners lose potential revenue from mining and render the network more susceptible to double spending attacks as well as to selfish mining attacks. Nodes representing merchants, exchanges, and other large entities are thus unable to secure their transactions or may not be able to broadcast them to the network to begin with. The resulting longer-term loss of trust in Bitcoin security may trigger a loss of value for Bitcoin. Attackers may even short Bitcoin and gain from the resulting devaluation. Our work underscores the importance of proposed modifications which argue for encrypting Bitcoin traffic or traffic exchanged among miners. Yet we stress that not all routing attacks will be solved by such measures since attackers still disrupt connectivity and isolate nodes by dropping Bitcoin packets instead of modifying them. Contributions are, our main contributions are the first comprehensive study of network attacks on Bitcoin, Section 3, ranging from attacks targeting a single node to attacks affecting the network as a whole. Number 2, a measurement study of the routing properties of Bitcoin, Section 4. We show that Bitcoin is highly centralized. Few ASs host most of the nodes, while others intercept a considerable fraction of the connections. Number 3, a thorough evaluation of the practicality of routing attacks, partitioning, and delay attacks. Our evaluation is based on an extensive set of measurements, large-scale simulations, and experiments on the actual Bitcoin software and network. Pardon me for just a moment here, I got a tickle in my throat. That ought to help a little. Alright. And so number 4, a comprehensive set of countermeasures, section 4, or 5 I guess, which can benefit even early adopters. While our countermeasures are Bitcoin specific, they carry important lessons for other cryptocurrencies which rely on a randomly structured peer-to-peer network atop the internet, such as Ethereum, Litecoin, and Zcash. Background, or section 2 background. A. BGP. Protocol BGP is the de facto routing protocol that regulates how IP packets are forwarded in the internet. Routes associated with different IP prefixes are exchanged between neighboring networks or autonomous systems. That's the AS, I guess. For any given IP prefix, as one autonomous system, the origin, is responsible for the original route advertisement, which is then propagated autonomous system by autonomous system until all autonomous systems learn about it. Routers then set their next hop and pick one of the available routes offered by their neighbors. This is done independently for each destination. In BGP, the validity of route announcements is not checked. In effect, this means that any autonomous system can inject forged information on how to reach one or more IP prefixes, leading to other autonomous systems to send traffic to the wrong location. These rogue advertisements, known as BGP hijacks, are a very effective way for an attacker to intercept traffic en route to a legitimate destination. BGP hijack. An attacker who wishes to attract all the traffic for a legitimate prefix, say 100.0.0.0/16, by hijacking could either 1. Announce P, or 2. Announce a more specific, longer prefix of P. In the first case, the attacker's route will be in direct competition with the legitimate route. As BGP routers prefer shorter paths, the attacker will, on average, attract 50% of the traffic. In the second case, the attacker will attract all the traffic originated anywhere on the internet, addressed to the destination as internet routers forward traffic according to the longest match entry. Note that traffic internal as to an autonomous system cannot be diverted via hijacking, as it does not get routed by BGP, but by internal routing protocols, ergo OSPF. For instance, in order to attract all traffic destined to P, the attacker could advertise 100.0.0.0/17 and 100.0.0.128.0/17. Routers in the entire internet would then start forwarding any traffic destined to the original 16 prefix according to the two covering 17s originated by the adversary. Advertising more specific prefixes has its limits, though, as BGP operators will often filter prefixes longer than /24. Yet, we show that the vast majority of Bitcoin nodes is hosted in shorter prefixes, section 6, and is thus susceptible to hijacking. By default, hijacking a prefix creates a black hole at the attacker's location. However, the attacker can turn a hijack into an interception attack simply by making sure she leaves at least one path untouched to the destination. B. Bitcoin. Transactions. Transaction validation requires nodes to be aware of the ownership of funds, unless of course they're using segregated witness, and the balance of each Bitcoin address. All this information can be learned from the Bitcoin blockchain, an authenticated data structure that effectively forms a ledger of all accepted transactions. Bitcoin's main innovation lies in its ability to synchronize the blockchain in an asynchronous way, with attackers possibly attempting to disrupt the process. Synchronization is crucial. Conflicting transactions attempting to transfer the exact same bitcoins to different destinations may otherwise be approved by miners that are unaware of each other. Block creation. Bitcoin's blockchain is comprised of blocks, batches of transactions that are appended to the ledger serially. Each block contains a cryptographic hash of its predecessor, which identifies its place in the chain, and a proof of work. The proof of work serves to make blockchain creation difficult and reduces the conflicts in the system. Conflicts which take the form of blocks that extend the same parent represent alternative sets of accepted transactions. Nodes converge to a single agreed version by selecting the chain containing the highest amount of computational work as the valid version, usually the longest chain. The proof of work also serves to limit the ability of attackers to subvert the system. They cannot easily create many blocks, which would potentially allow them to create a longer alternative chain that will be adopted by nodes and thus reverse the transfer of funds, double spend. The difficulty of block creation is set so that one block is created in the network every 10 minutes on average, which is designed to allow sufficient time for blocks to propagate through the network. However, if delays are high compared to the block creation rate, many forks occur in the chain as blocks are created in parallel. In this case, the rate of discarded blocks, known as the orphan rate or the fork rate, increases, and the security of the protocol deteriorates. Newly created blocks are propagated through the network using a gossip protocol. In addition to the propagation of blocks, nodes also propagate transactions between them that await inclusion in the chain by whichever node creates the next block. Network formation. Bitcoin acts as a peer-to-peer network, with each node maintaining a list of IP addresses of potential peers. The list is bootstrapped via a DNS server, and additional addresses are exchanged between peers. By default, each node randomly initiates 8 unencrypted TCP connections to peers in different 16 prefixes, or /16 prefixes. Nodes additionally accept connections initiated by others, by default on port 8333. The total number of the total number of connections nodes can make is 125 by default. Nodes continually listen to block announcements, which are sent via INV messages containing the hash of the announced block. If a node determines that it does not hold a newly announced block, it sends a get data message to a single neighbor. The block then responds by the peer then responds by sending the requested information in a block message. Blocks that are requested and do not arrive within 20 minutes trigger the disconnection of the peer and are requested from another. Transaction propagation occurs with a single sequence of INV, get data, and TX messages, which nodes announce, request, and share transactions that have not yet been included in the blockchain. Mining pools. Mining pools represent groups of miners that divide block creation rewards between them in order to lower the high economic risk associated with infrequent but high payments. They usually operate using the Stratum protocol. The pool server is connected to a Bitcoin D node that acts as a gateway to the Bitcoin network. The node collects recent information regarding newly transmitted transactions and newly built blocks, which are then used to construct a new block template. The template header is then sent via the Stratum server to the miners who attempt to complete it to a valid block. This is done by trying different values of the nonce field in the header. If the block is completed, the result is sent back to the Stratum server, which then uses the gateway node to publish the newly formed block to the network. Multi-homing. Mining pools often use multiple gateways hosted by different internet service providers. We refer to the number of different ISPs a pool has as its multi-homing degree. Number 3. Routing attacks on Bitcoin. In this section, we give an overview of the 2 routing attacks we describe in this paper. Number 1, partitioning the Bitcoin network, section 3A, and number 2, delaying the propagation of blocks. For each attack, we briefly describe its effectiveness and challenges as well as its impact on the Bitcoin ecosystem, section 3B. A. Partitioning the Bitcoin network. In this attack, an autonomous system level adversary seeks to isolate a set of nodes P from the rest of the network, effectively partitioning the Bitcoin network into two disjoint components. And for those of you who want to actually check this thing out, there are two illustrations demonstrating how the AS level adversary attack would actually look as far as topology is concerned. It's very interesting. Anyway, continuing. The actual content of P depends on the attacker's objectives and can range from one or a few merchant nodes to a set of nodes holding a considerable percentage of the total mining power. Attack. The attacker first diverts the traffic destined to nodes in P by hijacking the most specific prefixes hosting each of the IP addresses. Once on path, the attacker intercepts the Bitcoin traffic, ergo, based on the TCP ports, and identifies whether the corresponding connections cross the partition she tries to create. If so, the attacker drops the packets. If not, meaning the connections are contained within P, she monitors the exchanged Bitcoin messages so as to detect the, quote, leakage points. Leakage points are nodes currently within P which maintain connections with nodes outside of P that the attacker cannot intercept, namely, quote, stealth connections. The attacker can detect these nodes automatically and isolate them from others in P, Section 4. Eventually, the attacker isolates the maximal set of nodes in P that can be isolated. Example: we illustrate the partition attack on the simple network in Figure 1 that is composed of 8 autonomous systems, some of which host Bitcoin nodes. 2 mining pools are depicted as green on the left and a red on the right region. Both pools are multi-homed and have gateways in different autonomous systems. For instance, the red right pool has gateways hosted in Autonomous System 4, Autonomous System 5, and Autonomous System 6. We denote the initial Bitcoin connections with blue lines and those that have been diverted via hijacking with red lines. Dashed black lines represent private connections within the pools. Any autonomous system on the path of a connection can intercept it. Consider an attack by Autonomous System 8 that is meant to isolate the set of nodes P, A, B, C, D, E, and F. First, it hijacks the prefixes advertised by Autonomous System 1, Autonomous System 2, and Autonomous System 6 as the host nodes within P, effectively attracting the traffic destined to them. Next, Autonomous System 8 drops all connections crossing the partition, A to J, B to J, and F to G. Observe that node F is within the isolated set P, but is also a gateway of the red pool which F most likely communicates. The connection may not be based on the Bitcoin protocol and thus it cannot be intercepted, at least not easily. As such, even if the attacker drops all the Bitcoin connections she intercepts, Node F may still learn about transactions and blocks produced on the other side and might leak this information within P. Isolating P as such is infeasible. However, Autonomous System 8 can identify that Node F is the leakage point during the attack and exclude it from P, essentially isolating I to the first power, A, B, C, D, E, instead. This one to or I to the first power is actually the maximum subset of P that can be isolated from the Bitcoin network. So basically, if there's if there's any subsidiary connections that are giving information from the broader Bitcoin network to your subset of points that you're attacking, you just exclude them from the subset of group of nodes that you're attacking, and then you're clean to attack the other nodes. Nifty. B. Slowing down the Bitcoin network. In a delay attack, the attacker's goal is to slow down the propagation of new blocks sent to a set of Bitcoin nodes without disrupting their connections. As with partitioning, the attacker can be targeted aimed at the attack can be targeted, aimed at selected nodes, or network-wide, aimed at disrupting the ability of the entire network to reach consensus. Unlike partitioning attacks, though, an attacker can delay the overall propagation of blocks towards a node, even if she intercepts a subset of its connections. Attack. Delay attacks leverage three key aspects of the Bitcoin protocol. Number one, the asymmetry in the way Bitcoin nodes exchange blocks using INV, get data, and block messages. Section 2. Number 2, the fact that these messages are not protected against tampering, unencrypted, no secure integrity checks. And number 3, the fact that a Bitcoin node waits for 20 minutes after having requested a block from a peer before requesting it again from another peer. These protocol features enable an attacker intercepting even one direction of the victim's connection to delay the propagation of a block as long as this connection is traversed either by the actual block message or the corresponding get data message. Specifically, if the attacker intercepts the traffic from the victim, she can modify the content of the get data message the victim uses and to ask for blocks by preserving the message length and structure, and by updating the TCP and Bitcoin checksums. The modified message is accepted by the receiver and the connection stays alive. If the attacker intercepts the traffic towards a node, she can instead corrupt the content of the block message such that the victim considers it invalid. In both cases, the recipient of the blocks remains uninformed for 20 minutes. Example. As an illustration, consider Figure 2, and assume that Autonomous System 8 is the attacker and C the victim. Suppose that A and B both advertise a block, say block X, to C via an INV message, and that without loss of generality, the message from A arrives at C first. C will then send a get data message back to A requesting block X and start a 20-minute timeout count. By modifying the content of the get data node, 8 receives. Autonomous System 8 indirectly controls what node A will send to node C. This way, the attacker can delay the delivery of the block by up to 20 minutes while avoiding detection and disconnection. Alternatively, Autonomous System 8 could modify the block message. Practicality. We verified the practicality of delay attacks by implementing an interception software which we used against our own Bitcoin nodes. We showed that intercepting 50% of a node connections. Let's try that one again. We showed that intercepting 50% of a node's connections is enough to keep the node uninformed for 63% of its uptime. Section 8. We also evaluated the impact that autonomous systems, which are naturally traversed by a lot of Bitcoin traffic, could have on the network using a scalable, event-driven simulator. We found that due to the relatively high degree of multi-homing that pools employ, only very few powerful coalitions of network attackers, ergo all autonomous systems based in the US, could perform a network-wide delay attack. Such an attack is thus unlikely to occur in practice. Impact. Similarly to partitioning attacks, the impact of a delay attack depends on the number and type, ergo pool gateway, of impacted nodes. At the node level, delay attacks can keep the victim eclipsed, essentially performing a denial of service attack or rendering it vulnerable to zero confirmation double spends. If the node is a gateway of a pool, such attacks can be used to engineer block races and waste mining power of the pool. Network-wide attacks increase the fork rate and render the network vulnerable to other exploits. If a sufficient number of blocks were discarded, miners' revenue is decreased and the network is more vulnerable to double spending. A slowdown of block transmission can be used to launch selfish mining attacks by adversaries with mining power. Section 4. Partitioning Bitcoin. In this section, we elaborate on partition attacks in which an autonomous level adversary seeks to isolate a set of nodes, P. And actually, I'm going to take just a minor music break here because this thing is deceptively long. Apparently they did double pages. So like the page actually has 2 pages worth of information side by side on it. Dirty trick. Dirty trick. Anyway, let's go ahead and throw down a little bit of music here. Tool by Carius here on Coin Metal. And that was the Heretic Anthem by Slipknot. I love that song. You know, when I was a member at a gym, that was like one of my favorite songs to come on, man. Because like as soon as it did, I just like go nuts. Was doing any kind of cardio or whatever, and of course it kind of caused people to look at me and shit. But you know, screw 'em if they can't take a joke. Anywho. Here we are on section 4 of this deceptively long paper. I mean, I think we'll be able to get through the entirety of it. That shouldn't be that big a deal, but nonetheless, I feel deceived. We're on section 4, Partitioning Bitcoin. In this section, we elaborate on partition attacks in which, let's see, we already finished that part, I think. Cause leakage. Next, we walk through the entire attack process, starting with the okay. Sorry, I didn't actually read this part yet. Here we go. So, in this section, we elaborate on partition attacks in which an autonomous level adversary seeks to isolate a set of nodes P. We first describe which partitions are feasible by defining which connections may cause information leakage. Section 4A, to the isolated set. We then discuss how an attacker may select a P that is feasible. If she has some view of the Bitcoin topology, Section 4B. Next, we walk through the entire attack process, starting with the interception of Bitcoin traffic, the detection of leakage points, and the adaptation of P until the partition is successfully created. Section 4C. In particular, we present an algorithm which, given a set of nodes P, leads the attacker to isolate the maximal feasible subset. Finally, we prove that our algorithm is correct. Section 4D. Characterizing feasible partitions. This is Section A of Section 4, Partitioning Bitcoin. An attacker can isolate a set of nodes P from the network if, and only if, all connections AB, where sigma P and B is not equal to P, can be intercepted. Whatever the fuck. I'm sorry there. We refer to such connection as vulnerable, and to connections that the attacker cannot intercept as stealth. Vulnerable connections. A connection is vulnerable if 1. An attacker can divert it via a BGP attack, and 2. It uses the Bitcoin protocol. The first requirement enables the attacker to intercept the corresponding packets, while the second enables her to identify and then drop or monitor these packets. As an illustration, we consider Figure 3a and assume that an attacker, Autonomous System 8, wants to isolate P, in subsection A, B, and C, by hijacking the prefixes pertaining to these nodes. The attacker receives all traffic from nodes A and B to node C, as well as the traffic from node D to node A. The path the hijacked traffic follows is depicted with red dashed lines and the original path with blue lines. As all nodes communicate using the Bitcoin protocol, their connections can easily be distinguished, as we explain in section 4c. Here, Autonomous System 8 can partition P from the rest of the network by dropping the connection from node D to node A. Stealth connections. A connection is stealth if the attacker cannot intercept it. We distinguish 3 types of stealth connections. 1. Intra-autonomous system. 2. Intra-pool. And 3. Pool-to-pool. Intra-autonomous system. An attacker cannot intercept connections within the same autonomous system using BGP attack. Indeed, internal traffic does not get routed by BGP, but by internal routing protocols, ergo OSPF and EIGRP. Thus, any intra-autonomous system connection crossing the partition border renders the partition infeasible. Such connections represent only 1.14% of all the possible connection nodes can create. This percentage is calculated based on the topology we inferred in section 6. As an illustration, Figure 3b and consider Figure 3b and assume that the attacker, Autonomous System 8, wants to isolate P, A, B, and C by subsection A, B, and C, nodes A, B, and C. By hijacking the corresponding BGP prefixes, Autonomous System 8 can intercept connections running between nodes A and B to node C. However, she does not intercept the intra-autonomous system connection between A and X. This means that node X will inform node A of the blocks mined in the rest of the network, and node A will then relay this information further within P. Thus, P equals subsection A, B, and C nodes is not feasible. Yet observe that isolating I equaling subsection nodes B and C is possible. In the following, we explain how the attacker can detect that A maintains a stealth connection leading outside of the partition and dynamically adapt to isolate I instead. Intra-pool. Similarly to intra-autonomous system connections, an attacker might not be able to cut connections between gateways belonging to the same mining pool. This is because mining pools might rely on proprietary or even encrypted protocols for internal communication. As an illustration, consider Figure 3c and assume that the attacker, Autonomous System 8, wants to isolate P, subsection nodes A, B, C, and D. By hijacking the corresponding prefixes, she would intercept and cut all Bitcoin connections between nodes A, B, C, D, and nodes E and F. However, nodes A and F would still be connected internally as they belong to the same pool. Again, observe that while isolating P, A, B, C, and D, is not feasible, isolating I, B, C, D from the rest of the network is possible. Pool to pool. Finally, an attacker cannot intercept, possibly encrypted, private connections corresponding to peering agreements between mining pools. From the attacker's point of view, these connections can be treated as intrapool connections, and the corresponding pair of pools can be considered one larger pool. Note that such connections are different from public initiatives to interconnect all pools, such as the Bitcoin relays. Unlike private peering agreements, relays cannot act as bridges to the partition. See Appendix E. B. Preparing for the attack. Get your Cheetos. In light of these limitations, the attacker can apply two techniques to avoid having stealth connections crossing the partition she creates. First, she can include P, either all or none of the nodes of an autonomous system, to avoid intra-autonomous system connections crossing the partition. This can easily be done as the mapping from IPs to autonomous system nodes is publicly available. Secondly, she can include in P either all or none of the gateways of a pool to avoid intrapool connections crossing the partition. Doing so requires the attacker to know all the gateways of the mining pools she wants to include in P. Inferring the gateways is outside the scope of this paper, yet the attacker could use techniques described in Section 36, or reference 36, and leverage her ability to inspect the traffic of almost every node via hijacking. See Appendix C. Even with the above measures, P may still contain leakage points that the attacker will need to identify and exclude. Yet these considerations increase the chances of establishing the desired partition as well as reducing the time required to achieve it. C. Performing the attack. We now describe how a network adversary can successfully perform a partitioning attack. The attack is composed of two main phases. Number 1, diverting relevant Bitcoin traffic, and number 2, enforcing the partition. In the former phase, the adversary diverts relevant Bitcoin traffic using BGP hijacking. In the latter phase, the attacker cuts all vulnerable connections that cross the partition and excludes from P nodes which are identified as leakage points. Leakage points are nodes that are connected to the rest of the network via stealth connections. Intercept Bitcoin traffic. The attacker starts by hijacking all the prefixes pertaining to the Bitcoin nodes she wants to isolate, i.e., all the prefixes covering the IP addresses of nodes in P. As a result, she receives all the traffic destined to these prefixes, which she splits into two packet streams, relevant and irrelevant. Relevant traffic includes any Bitcoin traffic destined to nodes in P. This traffic should be further investigated. Irrelevant traffic corresponds to the remaining traffic which should be forwarded back to its legitimate destination. That was actually two sentences, my apologies. To distinguish between relevant and irrelevant traffic, the attacker applies a simple filter matching on the IP addresses, the transport protocol, and ports used, as well as certain bits of the TCP payload. Specifically, the attacker first classifies as irrelevant all non-TCP traffic, as well as all traffic with destination IPs which are not included in P. In contrast, the attacker classifies as relevant all traffic with destination or source TCP port, the default Bitcoin port 8333. Finally, she classifies as relevant all packets which have a Bitcoin header in the TCP payload. Any remaining traffic is considered irrelevant. Partitioning algorithm. Next, the attacker processes the relevant traffic according to algorithms 1 and 2. We start by presenting their goal before describing them in more detail. The high-level goal of the algorithms is to isolate as many nodes in P as possible. To do so, the algorithms identify L, the nodes that are leakage points, and disconnect them from the other nodes in P. Also, the algorithms maintain a set of verifiably isolated nodes, P1 equals P/UUL, where U corresponds to the nodes that cannot be monitored, ergo because they never send packets. In particular, algorithm 2 is in charge of identifying L, while algorithm 1 is in charge of identifying U, and performing the isolation itself. We now describe how the algorithms work. Algorithm 1 starts by initializing L and U to 0. For every received packet, the algorithm first decides whether the packet belongs to a connection internal to P/L or to one between a node in P/L and an external node based on the same source IP address. If the source IP is in P/L, the packet belongs to an internal connection, and it is given to algorithm 2 to investigate if the corresponding node acts as a leakage point. Algorithm 1, line 10. Otherwise, the packet belongs to a connection that crosses the partition and is dropped. Algorithm 1, line 12. Whether the sender of the packet is advertising information from outside of P/L, particularly, the attacker checks whether the packet contains an INV message with the hash of a block mined outside of P/L, or the block itself. If it does so, the sender must have a path of stealth connections to a node outside of P/L from which the block was transmitted. Thus, the sender is a leakage point and is added to L, algorithm 2, line 5. The actual packet is also dropped to prevent this information from spreading. To detect whether a node in P/L is a leakage point, an attacker should be able to intercept at least one of the node's connections. Specifically, the node should have a vulnerable connection to another node within P/L so that the attacker can monitor the blocks it advertises. To keep track of the nodes that the attacker cannot monitor, algorithm 1 maintains a set U which contains the nodes she has not received any packets from for a predefined time threshold. Algorithm 1, line 15. Whether one of these nodes manages to establish a connection that the attacker intercepts, it is removed from U. Algorithm 1, line 9. Example. We now show how the algorithms work on the example of Figure 3b, in which the attacker, Autonomous System 8, aims to isolate P, A, B, a subsection of nodes A, B, and C. By hijacking the prefixes corresponding to these nodes, the attacker intercepts the connections B and C and A and C and feeds the relevant packets to the algorithms. Recall that the partition is bridged by a stealth intra-autonomous system connection between nodes A and X, which cannot be intercepted by the attacker. When a block outside P is mined, node X will inform A, which then will advertise to block C. The attacker will catch this advertisement and will conclude that A is a leakage point. After that, the attacker will drop the packet and add A to L. As such, all future packets from A to other nodes from within P/L equal A and B will be dropped. Observe that, or A to B will be dropped. Observe that the partition isolating P/L equals B to C is indeed the maximum feasible subset of P. Correctness of the partitioning algorithm. We now prove the properties of algorithm 1. Theorem 1. Given P, a set of nodes to disconnect from the Bitcoin network, there exists a unique maximal subset, I, and there's some symbol I can't read there, P, that can be isolated. Given the assumption that Bitcoin nodes advertise blocks that they receive to all their peers, algorithm 1 isolates all nodes in I and maintains a set P1, P/U, that symbol I don't recognize, L, then another symbol I don't recognize. Man, I gotta learn my maths. And I that contains all nodes in I that have a monitored connection and are thus known to be isolated. Proof. Consider the set of nodes S and P that has a path of stealth connections to some nodes not in P. Clearly, nodes in S cannot be isolated from the rest of the network by the attacker. Let I equal P/S. Notice that I is the maximal set in P that can be disconnected by an attacker. Now notice that every node in S is placed in sets L or U by the algorithm. If the node has a monitored connection and is caught advertising external blocks, it is placed in L, algorithm 2, line 5. If it is not monitored, then it is placed in U, algorithm 1, line 15. Notice also that the entire set of I is isolated from the network. If some node has no stealth connection outside and was removed solely for the lack of monitoring, it is having all its packets from outside of P/L dropped. Algorithm 1, line 12. Delaying block propagation. This is section 5, by the way. While partitioning attacks, section 4, are particularly effective and can be performed by any autonomous system, they require full control over the victim's traffic and are also highly visible. In this section, we explore delay attacks, which can cause relatively severe delays in block propagation even when an attacker intercepts only one of the victim's connections and wishes the attack to remain relatively undetectable. In this attack, the adversary delays the delivery of a block by modifying the content of specific messages. This is possible due to the lack of encryption and of secure integrity checks of Bitcoin messages. In addition to these, the attacker leverages the fact that nodes send block requests to the first peer that advertised each block and wait 20 minutes for its delivery before requesting it from another peer. The first known attack leveraging this 20-minute timeout mandates the adversary to be connected to the victim and to be the first to advertise a new block. After a successful block delay, the connection is lost. In contrast, network-based delay attacks are more effective for at least 3 reasons. 1. An attacker can act on existing connections, namely, she does not need to connect to the victim, which is very often not possible, ergo, nodes behind a NAT. Number 2. An attacker does not have to be informed about recently mined blocks by the victim's peers to eclipse it. And number 3, the connection that was used for the attack is not necessarily lost, prolonging the attack. Particularly, the effectiveness of the delay attack depends on the direction and fraction of the victim's traffic the attacker intercepts. Intuitively, as Bitcoin clients request blocks from one peer at a time, the probability that the attacker will intercept such a connection increases proportionally with the fraction of the connections she intercepts. In addition, Bitcoin connections are bidirectional TCP connections, meaning the attacker may intercept one direction, ergo, if the victim is multi-homed, both, or none at all. Depending on the direction she intercepts, the attacker fiddles with different messages. In the following, we explain the mechanism that is used to perform the attacker if the attacker intercepts traffic from the victim, section 5a, or to the victim node, section 5b. While in both cases the attacker does delay block propagation for 20 minutes, the former attack is more effective. A. The attacker intercepts outgoing traffic. Once a node receives a notification that a new block is available via an INV message, it issues a download request to its sender using a getData message. As an illustration, in Figure 4a, the victim requests block 42 from the first of its peers that advertise the block. Since the attacker intercepts the traffic from the victim to its peer, she can modify this getData message to request an older block instead of the original one. In Figure 4a, for example, the attacker replaces the hash corresponding to block 42 with that of block 30. The advantage of doing so over just dropping the packet is that the length of the message is left unchanged. Notice that if the packet was dropped, the attacker would need to intercept both directions of the connection and update the TCP sequence numbers of all the following packets to ensure that the connection is not dropped. If the block is not delivered, the victim node will disconnect after 20 minutes. To avoid a disconnection, the attacker can use another getData sent within the 20-minute window to perform the reverse operation. Specifically, she modifies the hash back to the original one requested by the victim. Since the getData message for blocks and transactions have the same structure, the attacker is more likely to use the latter, as these are much more common. In Figure 4a, for example, she changes the hash of the transaction TX number 123 to the hash of block 142. Since the block is delivered within the timeout, neither of the nodes disconnects or has any indication of the attack, ergo, an error in the log files. B. The attacker intercepts the incoming traffic. We now describe the mechanism an attacker would use if she intercepts traffic toward the victim, i.e., she can see messages received by the victim but not the messages that it sends. This attack is less effective compared to the attack working in the opposite direction, as it will effectively result in the connection being dropped 20 minutes after the first delayed block, similar to demonstration or example number 28. In this case, the attack focuses on the block messages rather than on the getData messages. A naive attack would be for the attacker to simply drop any block message she sees. As Bitcoin relies on TCP, though, doing so would quickly kill the TCP connection. A better yet still simple approach is for the attacker to corrupt the contents of a block message while preserving the length of the packet. See Figure 4b. This simple operation causes the block to be discarded when it reaches the victim because of a checksum mismatch. Surprisingly, though, we discovered and verified that the victim will not request the block again, be it from the same or any other peer. After the 20-minute timeout elapses, the victim simply disconnects because its requested block did not arrive on time. An alternative for the adversary is to replace the hash of the most recent block with a hash of an older one in all the INV messages the victim receives. This attack, however, would fail if the attacker intercepts only a fraction of the connections, as the victim will be informed via other connections. As such, this practice is only useful when the attacker hijacks and thus intercepts all traffic directed to the victim. Section 6. How vulnerable is Bitcoin to routing attacks? A comprehensive measurement analysis. Evaluating the impact of routing attacks requires a good understanding of the routing characteristics of the Bitcoin network. In this section, we explain the data sets and the techniques used to infer a combined internet and Bitcoin topology. Section 6a. We then discuss our key findings and their impact on the effectiveness of the two routing attacks we consider. Section 5b. A. Methodology and datasets. Our study is based on three key datasets. Number 1, the IP addresses used by Bitcoin nodes and gateways of pools. Number 2, the portion of mining power each pool possesses. And number 3, the forwarding path taken by any two IPs. We then collected these datasets over a period of 6 months, starting from October 2015 through March 2016. We focus on the results from a 10-day period starting from November 5, 2015, as the results of our analysis do not change much through time. Bitcoin IPs. We started by collecting the IPs of regular nodes, which host no mining power, along with the IPs of the gateways the pools use to connect to the network. We gathered this data set by combining information collected by, and onto the second page here, two Bitcoin supernodes with publicly available data regarding mining pools. One supernode was connected to 2,000 Bitcoin nodes per day, collecting block propagation information, while the other was crawling the Bitcoin network, collecting the 6,000 IPs of active nodes each day. We inferred which of these IPs act as the gateway of a pool in 2 steps. First, we used block propagation information gathered by the first supernode, considering that the gateways of a pool are most likely the first to propagate the blocks this pool mines. Particularly, we assigned IPs to pools based on the timing of the INV messages received by the supernode. We considered a given IP to belong to a gateway of a pool if, number 1, it relayed blocks of that pool more than once during the 10-day period, and number 2, it frequently was the first to relay a block of that pool, at least half as many times as the most frequent node for that pool. Second, we also considered as extra gateways the IPs of the Stratum servers used by each mining pool. Indeed, previous studies noted that Stratum servers tend to be co-located in the same prefix as the pool's gateway. Since URLs of the Stratum servers are public, we simply resolve the DNS name found on the pool's websites or by directly connecting to them and add the corresponding IPs to our IP2Pool dataset. Mining power. To infer the mining power attached to pools, we tracked how many blocks each pool mined during the 10 days interval, and simply assign them to a proportional share of the total mining power. Automated system level topology and forwarding paths. We use the autonomous level topologies provided by CAIDA to infer the forwarding paths taken by any two automated autonomous. They abbreviated as ASs. It looks like asses, so I say autonomous systems or automated systems. Autonomous systems, I think, is what it's supposed to be. An autonomous system level topology is a directed graph in which a node corresponds to an autonomous system, and a link represents an interdomain connection between two neighboring autonomous systems. Links are labeled with the business relationship linking the two autonomous systems, customer, peer, or provider. We computed the actual forwarding paths following the routing tree algorithm described in description 30, which takes into account the business relationships between the autonomous systems, mapping Bitcoin nodes to autonomous systems. We finally inferred the most specific prefix and the autonomous system hosting each Bitcoin node by processing more than 2.5 million BGP routes, covering all internet prefixes, advertised on 128 BGP sessions, maintained by 3 RIPE BGP collectors. And it gives a couple designations here: RRC00, RRC01, and RRC03. The mapping is done by associating each prefix to the origin autonomous system advertising it, and by validating the stability of that origin autonomous system over time to avoid having the mapping polluted by hijacks. B. Findings. We now discuss the key characteristics of the Bitcoin network from the internet routing perspective. We explain which of them constitute enablers or hindrances for an autonomous system level attacker. A few autonomous systems host most of the Bitcoin nodes. Figure 5a depicts the cumulative fraction of Bitcoin nodes as a function of the number of hosting autonomous systems. We see that only 13 autonomous systems host 30% of the entire Bitcoin network. These autonomous systems pertain to the broadband providers such as Comcast, Verizon, or ChinaNet, as well as to cloud providers such as Hetzner and Amazon. We observe the same level of concentration when considering the distribution of Bitcoin nodes per IP prefix. Only 63 prefixes, 0.012% of the internet, host 20% of the network. Regarding delay attacks, this high concentration makes Bitcoin traffic more easy to intercept and therefore more vulnerable. With few autonomous systems hosting many nodes, any autonomous system on path, including the host autonomous systems, is likely to intercept many connections at once, making delay attacks more disruptive. Regarding partition attacks, the effect of the concentration is a bit more nuanced. Indeed, high concentration reduces the total number of feasible partitions, because of intra-autonomous systems connections that cannot be intercepted. Section 4A. At the same time, though, the remaining feasible partitions are much easier to achieve since they require fewer hijacked prefixes. Section 4. A few autonomous systems naturally intercept the majority of the Bitcoin traffic. Large transit providers, i.e. Tier 1s, tend to be traversed by a large fraction of all the Bitcoin connections. Figure 5b depicts the cumulative percentage of connections that can be intercepted by an increasing number of autonomous systems, ergo by colluding with each other. We see that only 3 autonomous systems, namely Hurricane Electric, Level 3, and Telenet, can together intercept more than 60% of all possible Bitcoin connections, with Hurricane alone being on path for 32% of all connections. Regarding delay attacks, these few autonomous systems could act as powerful delay attackers. Regarding partition attacks, this observation does not have any direct implication, as partitioning requires a full cut to be effective. Section 4. Greater than 90% of Bitcoin nodes are vulnerable to BGP attacks. 93% of all prefixes hosting Bitcoin nodes are shorter than 24, than a prefix of 24, making them vulnerable to a global IP hijack using more specific announcements. Indeed, prefixes slightly longer than 24, i.e. 25 or longer, are filtered by default by many ISPs. Observe that the remaining 7% hosted in 24s are not necessarily safe. These can still be hijacked by another autonomous system performing a shortest path attack, i.e. the attacker, who will advertise a 24 just like the victim's provider, will attract traffic from all autonomous systems that are closer to her in terms of number of hops. While this finding does not have a direct impact on delay attacks, it clearly helps partition attackers, as they can divert almost all Bitcoin traffic to their infrastructure. Modulo stealth connections. Section 4. Mining pools tend to be distributed and multi-homed. Mining pools have a complex infrastructure compared to regular nodes. We found that all pools use at least 2 autonomous systems to connect to the Bitcoin network, while larger pools such as AntPool, F2 pools, Ghash.io, Kano use up to 5 autonomous systems. Pool multi-homing makes both network attacks more challenging and is one of the main precaution measures node owners can use against routing attacks. While harder, routing attacks are still possible in the presence of multi-homing, as we illustrate in Section 8. Bitcoin routing properties are stable over time. While numerous nodes continuously join and leave the Bitcoin network, the routing properties highlighted in this section are stable. As validation, we ran our analysis daily over a 4-month period. We found that the same IPs were present on average for 15.2 consecutive days, excluding IPs that were seen only once. Moreover, 50 autonomous systems hosted each day 49.5% of Bitcoin clients, standard deviation 1.2%, while 24.7% of Bitcoin nodes are found daily in just 100 prefixes, standard deviation 1.77%. Section 7. Partitioning Bitcoin Evaluation. In this section, we evaluate the practicality and effectiveness of partitioning attacks by considering 4 different aspects of the attack. First, we show that diverting Bitcoin traffic using BGP attacks works in practice by performing an actual attack targeting our own Bitcoin nodes, Section 7a. Second, we show that attacking fewer than 100 prefixes is enough to isolate a large amount of the mining power due to Bitcoin's centralization, Section 7b. Third, we show that much larger hijacks already happen in the internet today, some already diverting Bitcoin traffic, Section 7c. Fourth, we show that Bitcoin quickly recovers from a partition attack once it has stopped, Section 7d. A. How long does it take to divert traffic with a hijack? We hijacked and isolated our own Bitcoin nodes, which were connected to the live network via our own public IP prefixes. In the following, we describe our methodology as well as our findings with regard to the time it takes for a partition to be established. Methodology. We built our own virtual autonomous system with full BGP connectivity using Transit Portal 46, TP46. Transit Portal provides virtual autonomous systems with BGP connectivity to the rest of the internet by proxying their BGP announcements via multiple worldwide deployments, essentially acting as a multi-homed provider to the virtual autonomous system. In our experiment, we used the Amsterdam Transit Portal to Transit Portal deployment as a provider and advertised 184.164.232.0/22 to it. Our virtual autonomous system hosted 6 Bitcoin nodes. Version Satoshi 0.13.0. Each node had a public IP in 184.164.232.0/22.1 to 0.6 addresses. It could therefore accept connections from any other Bitcoin node in the internet. We performed a partition attack against our 6 nodes using BGP hijacking. For this, we used Cornell, another TP deployment, as the malicious autonomous system. Specifically, we advertised the prefix 184.164.235.0/24 via the Cornell TP. This advertisement is a more specific prefix with respect to the announcement coming from the Amsterdam TP and covers all the IPs of our nodes. Thus, after the new prefix announcement is propagated throughout the internet, Bitcoin traffic directed to any of our nodes will transit via Cornell instead of Amsterdam. To mimic an interception attack, Section 2, we configured the Cornell TP to forward traffic back to our autonomous system. As such, connections to our nodes stayed up during the hijack even though they experienced a higher delay. Pardon me. Stuff gets long. We performed the attacks 30 times and measured the time elapsed from the announcement of the most specific prefix until all traffic towards our nodes was sent via the Cornell TP. Diverting Bitcoin traffic via BGP is fast. It takes less than 2 minutes. The results of our experiment are shown in Figure 6. The main insight is that the attacker received the hijacked traffic very quickly. After only 20 seconds, more than 50% of the connections were diverted. Within 1.5 minutes, all traffic was transiting via the malicious autonomous system. Thus, attacked nodes are effectively isolated almost as soon as the attack starts. We took great care to ensure that our experiments did not negatively impact the actual Bitcoin network. We discussed the ethical considerations. Jesus Christ, man, this thing is long. We discussed the we discussed the ethical considerations behind our experiments in Appendix F. B. How many prefixes must be hijacked to isolate mining power? Having shown that hijacking prefixes is an effective way to divert Bitcoin traffic, we now study the practicality of isolating a specific set of nodes P. We focus on isolating sets holding mining power because they are 1. More challenging to perform, as mining pools tend to be multi-homed, and number 2, more disruptive, as successfully partitioning mining power can lead to the creation of parallel branches of the blockchain. To that end, we first estimate the number of prefixes the attacker needs to isolate a specific set of nodes as a function of the mining power they hold. In the following subsection, we evaluate how practical a hijack of that many prefixes is with respect to the hijacks that frequently take place in the Internet. Methodology. As described in Section 4, not all sets of nodes can be isolated, as some connections cannot be intercepted. We therefore only determine the number of prefixes required to isolate sets P that are feasible in the topology we inferred in Section 6. In particular, we only consider these sets of nodes that contain 1, either all nodes of an autonomous system or none of them, and number 2, either the entire mining pool, namely all of its gateways or none of them. With these restrictions, we essentially avoid the possibility of having any leakage point within P that is caused by an intra-autonomous system or intra-pool stealth connection. However, we cannot account for secret peering agreements that may or may not exist between pools. Such agreements are inherently kept private, and their existence is difficult to ascertain. Hijacking greater than 100 prefixes is enough to isolate 50% of the Bitcoin mining power. In Table 1, we show the number of different feasible sets of nodes we found containing the same amount of mining power, fourth and first column respectively. We include the minimum and median number of prefixes the attacker would need to attack to isolate each portion of mining power, second and third column respectively. As predicted by the centralization of the Bitcoin network, Section 6, the number of prefixes an attacker needs to hijack to create a feasible partition is small. Hijacking less than 100 prefixes is enough to isolate up to 47% of the mining power. As we will describe next, hijack events involving similar numbers of prefixes happen regularly in the Internet. Notice that the number of prefixes is not proportional to the isolated mining power. For example, there is a set of nodes representing 47% of mining power that can be isolated by hijacking 39 prefixes, while isolating 30% of the mining power belonging to different pools would require 83 prefixes. Indeed, an attacker can isolate additional mining power with the same number of hijacked prefixes when several pools in the isolated set are hosted in the same autonomous systems. C. How many hijacks happen today? Do they impact Bitcoin? Having an estimate of the number of prefixes that need to be hijacked to partition the entire network, we now look at how common such hijacks are over a 6-month window from October 2015 to March 2016. We show that BGP hijacks are not only prevalent, but also end up diverting Bitcoin traffic. Methodology. We detected BGP hijacks by processing 4 billion BGP updates advertised during this period on 182 BGP sessions maintained by 3 ripe BGP collectors, RRC00, RRC01, and RRC03. We consider an update for a prefix P as a hijack if the origin autonomous system differs from the origin autonomous system seen during the previous month. To avoid false positives, we do not consider prefixes which have seen multiple origin autonomous systems during the previous month. We count only a single hijack per prefix and origin pair each day. If autonomous system X hijacks the prefix P twice in one day, we consider both as part of a single hijack. Large BGP hijacks are frequent in today's internet and already end up diverting Bitcoin traffic. Figure 7 summarizes our results. We see that there are hundreds of thousands of hijack events each month, Figure 7a. While most of these hijacks involve a single IP prefix, large hijacks involving between 300 and 30,000 prefixes are also seen every month. Figure 7b depicts the number of Bitcoin nodes for which traffic was diverted in these hijacks. For each month, at least 100 Bitcoin nodes are victim of hijacks. As an illustration, 447 distinct nodes, 7.8% of the Bitcoin network, ended up hijacked at least once in November 2015. D. How long do the effects of a partition attack last? Having investigated the methodology and the relative cost of creating a partition, we now explore how quickly the Bitcoin network recovers from a partition attack. We found that while two components quickly reconnect, they stay sparsely connected for a very long time. We first described the experimental setup. Next, we explain why partitions are not persistent in practice, and briefly hint on how an attacker could prolong their lifetime. Methodology. We build a testbed composed of 1,050 Bitcoin clients running the default Bitcoin D core version 0.12.1 in testnet mode. Each node runs in a virtual machine connected to a virtual switch and is configured with a different random IP address. Nodes automatically connect to other nodes in the testbed. We enforced a 50% to 50% partition by installing drop rules on the switch, which discard any packet belonging to a connection crossing the partition. Observe that a 50% to 50% split is the easiest partition to recover from, as after the attack, the chance that a new connection would bridge the two halves is maximal. We measure the partition recovery time by recording the percentage of connections going from one side to the other in 30-minute intervals. Bitcoin TCP connections are kept alive for extended periods. As such, new connections are mostly formed when nodes reconnect or leave the network, churn. To simulate churn realistically, we collected the lists of all reachable Bitcoin nodes every 5 minutes from February 10th to March 10th, 2016. For every node, I, connected to the network on the first day, we measured t to the I as elapsed time until its first disappearance. To determine the probability of a node to reboot, we randomly associated every node in our testbed with a type t to the I, and assumed this node reboots after a period of time determined by an exponential distribution with a parameter of lambda equals 1 over time to the 1, or t to the 1. The time for next reboot is again drawn according to the same distribution. This method produces churn with statistics matching the empirical ones. We repeat each measurement at least 5 times and report the median value found. Bitcoin quickly recovers from a partition attack, yet it takes hours for the network to be densely connected again. We measured how long it takes for the partition to heal by measuring how many connections cross it before, during, and after its formation, figure 8. We consider 2 different attack scenarios. 1, the adversary does not intercept any Bitcoin traffic before or after the attack, and number 2, the adversary intercepts some connections naturally. Case 1. The adversary intercepts no traffic after the attack. It takes 2 hours until 1/5 of the initial number of connections crossing the partition are established, while after 10 hours, only half of the connections have been re-established. The slow recovery is due to the fact that nodes on both sides do not actively change their connections unless they or their neighbors disconnect. Case 2. The adversary intercepts some traffic after the attack. If an autonomous system level adversary is naturally on path for some of the connections, she can significantly prolong the partition's lifetime. To do so, the attacker would just continue to draw packets on the connections she naturally intercepts. We measured the effect of such attacks for attackers that are on path for 14%, 18%, and 28% of the connections, respectively, figure 8. We see that an autonomous system adversary who is initially on path for 28% of the connections can prolong the already slow recovery of the partition by 58%. Many other ways to increase the persistence of a partition exist. Due to space constraints, we discuss some of them in Appendix D. Despite the long healing time, the orphan rate of the network returned to normal, even with 1% of all connections crossing the partition. This fact shows that partitions need to be perfect in order to affect the network significantly. Section 8. And I think we're on schedule to finish this thing, because a lot of this is like pictures and stuff near the end, maybe. I don't know. We may or may not finish this thing, and if we don't, I have in fact posted the link of this on my Twitter, so you can go back and check it and see all the fuck ups and read all the math that I wasn't able to read, and also catch references to all the figures. Anyway, let's continue. How severely can an attacker delay a single node? Methodology. We implemented a prototype of our interception software on top of Scrappy, a Python-based packet manipulation library. Our prototype follows the methodology of Section 5 and is sufficient both in terms of state maintained and processing time. Our implementation indeed maintains only 32 bits of memory hash size for each peer of the victim node. Regarding processing time, our implementation leverages pre-recompiled regular expressions to efficiently identify critical packets, such as those with block messages, which are then processed in parallel by dedicated threads. Observe that the primitives required for the interception software are also supported by recent programmable data planes, opening up the possibility of performing the attack entirely on network devices. We use our prototype to attack one of our own Bitcoin nodes, running version 0.12, version 0.12.0, running on Ubuntu 14.04. The prototype ran on a machine acting as a gateway to the victim node. Using this setup, we measured the effectiveness of an attacker in delaying the delivery of blocks by varying the percentage of connections she intercepted. To that end, we measured the fraction of time during which the victim was uninformed of the most recently mined block. We considered our victim node to be uninformed when its view of the main chain is shorter than that of a referenced node. The reference node was another Bitcoin client running the same software and the same number of peers as the victim, but without any attacker. Delay attackers intercepting 50% of a node's connection can waste 63% of its mining power. Table 2 demonstrates the percentage of the victim's uptime during which it was uninformed of the last mined block, considering that the attacker intercepts 100%, 80%, and 50% of its connections. Each value is the average over an attack period of 200 hours. To further evaluate the practicality of the attack, the table also depicts the fraction of Bitcoin nodes for which there is an autonomous system in addition to their direct provider that intercepts 100%, 80%, and 50% of its connections. Our results reflect the major strength of the attack, which is in its effectiveness when the adversary intercepts only a fraction of the victim's connections. Particularly, we see that an attacker can waste 63% of a node's mining power by intercepting half of its connections. Observe, even when the attacker is intercepting all the victim's connections, the victim eventually gets each block after a delay of 20 minutes. Regarding the amount of vulnerable nodes to this attack in the Bitcoin topology, we found that for 67.9% of the nodes, there is at least one autonomous system other than their provider that intercepts more than 50% of their connections. For 21.7% of the nodes, there is in fact an autonomous system other than their provider that intercepts all their connections to other nodes. In short, 21.7% of the nodes can be isolated by an autonomous system that is not even their provider. B. Can powerful attackers delay the entire Bitcoin network? Having shown that delay attacks against a single node are practical, we now quantify the network-wide effects of delaying block propagation. Unlike partitioning attacks, we showed that network-wide delay attacks that do not utilize active hijacking are unlikely to happen in practice. Indeed, only extremely powerful attackers, such as a coalition grouping all autonomous systems based in the U.S., could significantly delay the Bitcoin network as a whole, increasing the orphan rate to more than 30% from the normal 1%. We also investigate how this effect changes as a function of the degree of multi-homing that pools adopt. Methodology. Unlike partition attacks, the impact of delay attacks on the network is difficult to ascertain. One would need to actually slow down the network to fully evaluate the cascading effect of delaying blocks. We therefore built a realistic event-driven simulator following the principles in 39 and used it to evaluate such effects. Our simulator models the entire Bitcoin network and the impact of a delay attack, considering the worst-case scenario. And there is more to this paper. Unfortunately, we did not complete all of it. We did get through most of it, but there is about 4, by their measure, additional pages to this bad boy. My apologies, folks. But we did plow through a great deal of it. And I'll make sure that I do post a link to this PDF when I post this up on the YouTube channel, and I am recording this, so in the entirety of this live read has been recorded. Whether or not we actually get it to YouTube is another case, but there's a really, really good chance of that. In any case, we will be back again on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here on Radio Crypto. And so, until then, you can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook. You can also find me in IRC. Unfortunately, I've not yet adopted Telegraph. I may yet at some point in the future. Haven't decided yet. In any case, until Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, I want you all to trade safe, because it is picking up out there, but it is still a little sketchy. So, you just got to watch yourself out there. I want you to do your homework, because you know what? There are new and exciting things happening in crypto all the time. New opportunities to be making money, new opportunities to expand your own business and such. All of it coming on the horizon. And number 3, I want you all to watch out for your bunghole, because among those opportunities are most certainly opportunities to get raped, and none of us want that. So yeah, until Wednesday, y'all have an excellent night and an excellent time trading out there. And until then, this is my final dance for the evening, a little Slipknot, and we were Slipknot heavy today, but we didn't have as many music breaks, if you noticed here. Wait and Bleed. Night all.